EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody. A Thursday edition of Birds 365, a coordinator Thursday edition. Johnny Mac, good Thursday to you, sir. How you doing?
Doing well, yeah. It's not a rumor. The Eagles have coordinators, and they will speak later today, scheduled about 1 o'clock-ish. I always say ish because, but the coordinators tend to be on time, so at least the previous ones. So we'll see how it works out. But, you finally get to hear from Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore.
And Michael Clay. I think Michael Clay will speak too. Is that right?
I don't know, to be honest. Probably not.
But at least we know Michael Clay. We know he exists.
Yeah.
So everybody's waiting to hear from Vic and from Kellen. John, how do you approach the first meeting with two coordinators like that from your perspective as a reporter?
Plenty of experience in recent years with the Eagles. I mean, with Vic and Kellen, it's not as a big a deal. You're trying to feel people, especially when you have young coordinators. In the case of, you want to go back to Jonathan Gannon, you had no idea. I assumed, to use him as an example, he's a first-time defensive coordinator when he got here. I assumed he was going to use more the Mike Zimmer philosophy, or maybe some Matt Eberflus thrown in, because those were the spots he was at previously. And he went with Vic's scheme and Vic's philosophy. So you're trying to feel them out, what they're going to do. In the case of Vic and Kellen, we pretty much know because they have long histories. In the case of Vic, a very long history. So it's more about players and how you're going to fit in with the coaching staff, especially with this unique setup with Nick Sirianni. I think more people are going to be excited about Vic talking because he's the higher profile one. But to me, it's more about Kellen Moore because that situation's far more important from my aspect of how it's going to unfold. Because Vic's in charge of the defense.
Right. I mean, I agree. I'm a lot more interested actually in Kellen Moore than I am Vic Fangio.
Yeah. So to me, the other side of the football is the far more interesting part. Even though it's got more talent, it's probably going to be better. Where the buck stops on defense. We don't quite know where it's going to stop on offense. We know Jeffrey Lurie wanted it handed over to someone else, but we'll see in the midst of it all how that factors in, because already we've seen Nick sort of we're going to do stuff. It would be dumb to take everything out of the offense that was successful. So already you see those little breadcrumbs saying, all right, this is going to be interesting because these two don't have a history together. And is it going to be seamless? Probably not. Is he going to allow Kellen Moore that had the freedom that Shane Steichen and Brian Johnson did not? These are all interesting questions. We're not going to find out the answers to them, obviously, today. But I think the dynamic is more interesting with Kellen Moore than Vic Fangio, because Vic's in charge of the defense.
Yeah, so we'll see how the questions go. We'll see what Kellen and Vic have to say today at their coordinator press conferences, as Johnny Mac mentioned, scheduled for 1 o'clock today. So John will wrap up Birds 365 and head down to the NovaCare complex to talk to them. I want to welcome everybody in today, our loyal chat. We appreciate everybody being here. Make sure you like the show. Let's get to 150 likes again. So we appreciate, if you like the show, you like it. We appreciate you all being here. Johnny Mac, how much of a problem? Maybe it's not a problem, but from my perspective, I see a potential problem with the way they're set up. And what I mean is, if Kellen Moore has great success this year, is he going to be back here? Is he going to get a head coaching job and you're going to need another new coordinator? I've been saying all offseason, I want to see Jalen Hurts take another step forward. But it's got to be hard when he's had this many coordinators And my problem with the setup now is if Kellen succeeds, he's likely a head coaching candidate, maybe not, but likely. Then what? You have another new coordinator, and you're just going to keep that wheel going?
Yeah. Again, it depends on your definition of success. If he becomes a legitimate head coaching candidate, look, if they win the Super Bowl, he's probably gone. That's how it works. If they even get to the Super Bowl, as you saw with Shane and Jonathan, he might be gone. Again, depending on how he interviews and what other teams looking for coaches want. But generally, hot offensive guys. And if they're coming off a tremendous offensive season, that'll be him. If they win the Super Bowl, they're not firing the head coach. A lot of people, may want to go down that route because they'll give Kellen Moore the credit, whatever. They're not firing the head coach if they win the Super Bowl. So it's not like you're firing the guy and elevating Kellen Moore. So you're going to lose him. That's just the nature of football. I never got in the aspect of, the head coach has to be the play caller because you're at the risk of losing him. Yeah, come on. There's so much turnover in this league. The Eagles are more patient than most, certainly when it comes to the front office, more so. But even from a coaching perspective, they're more patient than most. There's so much upheaval. What are you worried about 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line? He's probably not going to be the offensive coordinator. If they fail, he's probably not going to be the offensive coordinator. And you're
If
talking,
they fail, there's probably going to be a whole new regime.
well,
let's
that's
be
the
real.
whole point. If you fire the head coach, well, the new head coach is probably going to want his own people in there. Not, the way Jeffrey Lurie has gone in the past at times, with the exception of Chip Kelly, who got murdered or is about to get murdered later today by Deshaun Jackson and LaShawn McCoy when their podcast is released. But with the exception of Chip Kelly, was kind of the hot candidate at the time for whatever reason. He's always gone understated when he's hiring a head coach, off the radar, going all the way back to Andy Reid, really. So, if you go that direction again, well, maybe you can say, hey, you can have the job, but Kellen's going to be the offensive coordinator, or you can have the job, but Vic's going to be the defensive coordinator. So there's a small path that the head coach gets fired and coordinators can be back, but it's a small path. So
I've always agreed with you on your take on play calling head coaches versus overall CEO head coaches. And I'm wondering if that's changing though, because of this. Like, if you're a team that has Super Bowl aspirations year in and year out, you have all these guys under contract, wouldn't it be great to have a head coach that's a play caller that can handle those duties? Because really, that's what Nick Sirianni was originally hired for. And if you're going to keep losing these coordinators, it's tough to say, okay, we're going to make a run to the Super Bowl every year with a new coordinator every year. How can we expect to get the most out of Jalen Hurts in the offense if that's the case?
I don't believe you need a head coach who's a play caller. In fact, I've always advocated I'd rather have a CEO coach. Long before Nick Sirianni became one here. So it's not about Nick Sirianni, but from the standpoint of, if I'm going to hire a guy to coach the football team, I want him to coach the entire football team. I don't want his head in Sean McVay, when he first got the Rams job, and he's, still today, he's the guy when people talk about offensive football in this league. And when he first got the Rams job, he would go sit down on the bench with the quarterback and have his head buried when Wade Phillips was handling the defense. And I'm like, I don't want that. Not that you can't succeed. Most people go that way. So if most people go that way, the odds are you're going to win at times with a coach like that, because most teams, I think it's regressive thinking. They think it's forward thinking. Most teams go that way. So the odds are you're going to have guys, but Kyle Shanahan's the best. if there's close to 100% consensus in this league, it's that Kyle Shanahan is the best play caller, the best schemer, the best everything. And he's a freaking disaster when it comes to game management. And you know why he's a freaking disaster when it comes to game management?
calling plays.
Because he's always worried about the next play, and he's not focused on the situation of the game and all that kind of stuff. Now you can go about that in different ways. You can hire a game management specialist. A lot of teams have that now. But if you're not going to listen to them, what does that matter? So, you're not getting a better play caller than Kyle, and he constantly craps the bed when it comes to game management.
Well, Andy Reid's another example if you want to point to the success side, right? I mean, he's got 3 Super Bowls now, so
and people killed him here for game management.
Yeah, and that's been. I mean, it took him a long time to learn how to manage a game, and he's still learning.
He still makes he still makes mistakes, and he's not. And he's more. Andy's, when people call Andy hands off play callings during games. Andy's got this cachet to him that he does. He can do whatever he wants. So he might hand off play calling, and you don't even know it for a quarter, a half.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it is Andy's offense, right? And I think that's where it's interesting this year, because last year, Nick would always say, when everybody was mad at Brian Johnson, this is my offense, this is my offense, this is my offense. That's why I'm curious to hear what Kellen has to say today and how they frame this up. Is it Nick's offense and Kellen's the play caller, or is Kellen coming in with autonomy to run the offense how he sees?
Well, it's supposed to be the latter. He's supposed to have the autonomy, but that's what I always brought up with Nick, is he said, no matter who's calling the plays, whether it's Shane or Brian Johnson or Howie Roseman or Zander Krause or Dom DeSandro or Jeffrey Lurie, it's always going to be my offense. That's what he said. Now, it's not his offense in theory now, because of, whether you believe he was ordered to do it or you believed he was a political animal and smart enough to read the room and understand he wasn't going to have a job unless he morphed into being more open-minded to new ideas, as Jeffrey Lurie wanted, whichever it is, that's the reality of the situation. It's no longer supposed to be his offense. And that's why the dynamic is so interesting.
Yeah.
Where Nick is telling the complete truth is, and I've said this for anybody who's been a long time listener of this show, and they hate it. Play calling is so overrated, number one, because that big, in the case of certain coaches, it's bigger than others. Some it's a Cheesecake Factory menu. That's your process during the week. So those big play call sheets, you have everything on there, and you have everything game plans, and you got third and short, you got third and middle, and you have a group of plays
right
built into the game plan, and you pick one off the now where the good play callers versus the bad play callers, and Shane was a good example, had a feel for what was working on a particular day. Not always perfect, but had a better feel. So, hey, Jalen's doing this well on a particular day, or we're really working. Green Bay's not. I remember him talking about Green Bay
on their defense or something like that.
Yeah, they're not coming out of their nickel and dime looks, and we're going to run the football down their throat. He had a good feel of in the moment, choosing from his menu of plays what was going to work in a certain situation. Was great at the callback. He would set somebody up, and then he would go back to the same look and run something else off it, and get them that way. So I'm not trying to downplay the feel of a play caller, but as far as the menu of plays at their disposal, that's what you're doing during the week. And that's what Nick has tried to impart 1.5 million times, whether people listen to it or not. And then there's the aspect, I'll go back to Doug Peterson at the end. Doug did what Andy did. He handed off play calling at times. especially in red zone and third down situations when he was trying to get a spark. With the year Rich Scangarella was here and Press Taylor, and they had that weird convoluted no offensive coordinator, which didn't work. Nobody knew it. Nobody knew it until he said it. So how important is play calling if you can't even tell who's calling the plays?
No, I get it. I do think play calling, I would disagree that play calling is not important, but I understand the context you're providing of, most people care more about the results, honestly, than they do about the play calling. But for me, it's consistency. Let's just a hypothetical. Kellen Moore is the best play caller we've had in the Nick Sirianni era, and the Eagles march all the way through the NFC title game, and they have an appearance in the Super Bowl. Okay, Kellen Moore gets hired, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but Kellen Moore gets hired. Now we have a new guy coming in with a new play calling, a new system that Jalen Hurts has to adapt to. That part of it, I hate.
Well, the turnover is, again, part of the modern NFL. Now, you hope it's not as quick as it has been with the Eagles, and certainly, and that's part of the issue I have. If you're hiring young coordinators, I would say to Jeffrey Lurie, you're not expecting a learning period on the job, so to speak. That's on you. That's just dumb. So you should have hired a veteran coordinator to begin with, or you should have steered Nick in that direction. Yeah, there's always a growing aspect to it. Same thing with players. I would argue if the Eagles have a Super Bowl level season, I say this constantly, that tells you that, and they have a great offensive year. That tells you two things about Kellen Moore. Tells you, one, he's got a bunch of good players, and two, he's a good teacher, because that means they're executing properly. And that to me is far more valuable than having a good play caller, which, as you pointed out, and I say constantly, and I don't care if people ever get this. I don't, because I know they're never going to get it. They don't judge play calls. They judge play results. You have no idea what the play call is. You have no idea where it's designed to go. You have no idea what's trying to be accomplished. I know this for a fact because I don't have any idea, and I talk to these guys constantly. And as you bring up the A.J. Brown, because that was the best example, the A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts going rogue in Seattle. That was the best example, because you had the head coach trying to defend that, and to be honest, looking like a fool, as AJ said, by trying to defend it. Oh, other than it didn't make any sense to anybody on the outside. And sure enough, it didn't make sense because he was trying to protect his players who went rogue. And then you have the full context and saying, is that a bad play call? Well, it wasn't the play call.
Right.
And
I like when they have the ability to do that, though. I like when the quarterback is making $55 million. I would prefer him to go rogue if he thinks that's the best thing to do.
And by the way, even the poor results isn't necessarily a bad decision. Seattle won the game on the same decision, essentially, on the other side of the football. The quarterback read it correctly, and they executed. The result was bad. Just because the result was bad, and I'll go back to Doug, you might have the best play call you've ever called dialed up, and the left guard misses a block, and bang, nobody will know it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some nitpicking I could do to that when it's 3rd and 23 and they throw a bubble screen. People are going to criticize that. Now, if it went for 40 yards, yeah, you're right, but
well, in 3rd and 23, when you throw a bubble screen, you're not trying to get a first down.
Yeah, well, I know.
It's like
there was that highly debated call late, and I forget what game it was, where the Eagles' offense was stagnant and A.J. Brown was shrugging, or Devontae Smith was shrugging. They showed him on camera. I forget.
Well, they always say that, but that's the point. It's like a baseball manager throwing a garbage reliever in because you're down 10-3. You're not trying to come back. You're trying to get to the next day. In the case of a bubble screen on 3rd and 23, you're trying to pick up 5-10 yards to get in a better position to do whatever you want to do when you're punting the football or whatever you want to do. Maybe you're trying, if it's a game desperate situation, 3rd and 23 are going to lose, then you got to do something else. Then if they don't try to, you got 2 downs at that point. So you're trying to get the first down. You're trying to accomplish a certain number of things. But if it's 4th and 23, yeah, I'm with you. Throw it up. Who cares? Give somebody a chance to make a play. And if you're throwing a bubble screen there, yeah, have at it. But there's a lot of context to these things. And the biggest context to play calling in general is most of the work is done during the week. And then it's about feel. Shane had it. Ryan didn't. Maybe he'll develop it. Shane
had it. Shane had it good. Shane had it better than we thought. It was, once he left kind of thing, we realized how good he was at it.
Yeah, but the first year, nobody was saying Shane was that. So.
Yeah, but that's my point about the consistency. There's always an acclimation period that you have to give. But let's move on because I want to get to a break. We have Bill Colarulo, our man, Big Bill, coming up next. I see Big Bill in the green room, waiting room. So we'll get to Big Bill. And then coming up later in hour 2, we have Bob Brookover from NJ.com. So good show planned. It's coordinator day, Johnny Mac, 1 o'clock today. The Eagles' new coordinators, Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore, will meet with the media for the very first time. So we'll see what Johnny Mac gets out of that. Let's get to a commercial timeout. On the other side, Big Bill coming up on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. A Thursday edition, a coordinator Thursday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by our great friend Bill Colarulo, working down at 97.5 The Fanatic. If you like Bill Colarulo, drop a like on this show because we like Bill Colarulo. Bill, welcome to the show, man.
What's going on, gentlemen? Good to see you guys.
Happy Coordinator Day, Big Bill. You excited? You want to hear from Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore? And which are you more excited for?
I'm more excited to hear from Kellen Moore. Now, I don't know if we're going to learn much. As you know, I don't think they're going to give us too much information. But I'm excited to hear from Kellen Moore. I mean, there's a lot of debate. Is this Kellen Moore's offense? Is it going to be a blending of the offenses with Nick Sirianni? So I'm curious to hear what he's going to say. But I'm excited to hear Fangio, too, because how's he going to deploy all of these pieces and all this versatility and all this athleticism he now has on the defensive side of the ball? So it should be a good day. It gives us something to talk about now that we're in the offseason.
Yeah. Silver lining.
Bill, I want to, before we get in more into the coordinators, like you said, we're probably not going to learn much today, but I do want to get your take on what broke over, I guess, yesterday with Kenny Gainwell and his comments about the culture and the communication between the front office and the players. What was your takeaways from that? Did you think that kind of clued us into maybe a bigger problem or making too much of it?
Well, I'll tell you what, I can't imagine that the Eagles are happy with what Kenny Gainwell had to say.
Yeah.
I don't understand how these players don't just learn, keep your mouth shut. I don't know why you would go on a podcast and start talking about that. Now, I don't know what Kenny Gainwell meant, because if you listen to him when he talks about, we weren't communicating, what is he referring to? We really don't know what he's referring to. Was it because of what was going on with the coordinators and Howie Roseman and moving on from Sean Desai to Matt Patricia? Was it something in the locker room? It was weird. If you listen to the whole clip, because I went and listened to it a couple of times.
I'm glad you brought that up because there's so many contradictions in there, Bill, from the fact that he's talking about connection, right? Well, he's talking about Kansas City. What the hell does Kenny Gainwell know about Kansas City? I mean, he might have a friend there or two, but how does he know how the front? Now, they won the Super Bowl, so it's saying, all right, things are going well. I would argue that has more to do with Patrick Mahomes than anything else, but nonetheless, that was number one. My first takeaway is like, you have no idea what's going on with Kansas City. But number two, it started with the connection. And then if you go down and listen to the entire thing like you did, Bill, he starts talking about essentially a lack of confidence when they got hit.
Yeah.
And really it's probably the San Francisco and Dallas, the back-to-back where everybody can point to. And he said everybody's heads were down, and that to me is not connection. So what does he even mean? What is it? I think maybe he misspoke, but to your point about the defense, he's not involved with Sean Desai, Matt
Exactly.
Patricia. So I
don't know. I don't know what he meant, because he does contradict himself throughout the statement on the podcast. But look, to me, it's not really news. I mean, you look at that team last year, and they struggled down the stretch. They were never able to bounce back after they got beat by San Francisco. I've said before, and I used to say it on the Philly Sports Power Hour a lot, that I think this was the Super Bowl hangover. This is what happens. This is why it's so difficult to get back, that once you look through every single play, you're looking at the lens of, are we good enough to get back to the Super Bowl after you get close and lose? Once they got punched in the mouth by the 49ers, they all looked at themselves in the mirror and said, we're not good enough to get back. And then that just snowballed down the stretch, and they were never able to fix that problem. That's what I saw last season. So hopefully they'll get their stuff together this year. Look, there's been a lot of change. They're bringing in a lot of new players. I think the Saquon Barkley move, not only on the field, I think what he kind of adds that buzz. I mean, we saw Jalen Hurts actually smiling in the weight room with Saquon Barkley. So I kind of like that, what that's bringing to this locker room. It already feels like it's going to be a completely different season, a different year, when you don't have that quote unquote Super Bowl hangover over your head.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out, Bill. A lot of optimism in the city, as you just pointed to. You're getting the feel. It already feels different.
Yep.
Maybe too much. Is there too much optimism? I know Howie had a good draft, but we'll have to see how these players work out. two new coordinators coming in, as we talked about. They're going to talk to the media today for the first time. Should we be tempering our expectations for this team?
Well, I still think there's a lot of question marks on the defensive side of the football. I mean, I'm still not sure that they've answered the linebacker questions. We don't know how these rookies are going to step up and play as rookies. I know everyone's excited for Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. I am as well, but they're rookies. You don't know how they're going to play. There's people who are excited about Jeremiah Trotter Jr. as a 5th rounder. I'm excited too.
Howie Roseman is too.
But to look at it and try to get that many players, you look at last year's defense, and obviously linebacker was a question mark, safety was a question mark, and people were expecting some of these rookies to come in and have huge impacts. It just doesn't happen that way in the NFL all the time. There's the outliers. There's some NFL rookies who can come in and really contribute. But even look at Jalen Carter. As great as he was to start the season, that rookie wall is a real thing. You even saw Jalen Carter hit that wall. So I'm still having concerns at the linebacker position. I'm excited for safety, but there's not many safeties on this roster right now. You got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship. Sidney Brown's probably not ready week 1, right, John? I mean, he tears his ACL in week 18. He may start on the.
I'm going to predict Sidney Brown's ready week 1.
Wow.
Great. It's one thing about ACLs, and I talk about it all the time. I think people have trouble shaking off. It used to be a year-long injury. Now it's 9 months.
Yeah.
He's not going to have an off season, but I mean, it's consistently, they've made so many advances in medical care. And I've already seen Sidney. He looks like he could play today. You never know. You might have a setback. He's not going to do much in the off season, obviously, even in training camp. But he said week 1, he's young. He's in phenomenal shape. Every indication the surgery went well. I think he's going to be back week 1. And if not, it's going to be really early in the season, really early.
Because I think he's an important piece this year. When you look at the safety position, you have Chauncey and you have Reed. If Sidney's not ready, we don't know if Cooper DeJean's going to play safety or not. He said on Up and Adams that they have him working in at corner and nickel right now. They don't have him working in at safety.
Yeah,
so we'll
Sidney
see.
Brown is back. That would almost rule out safety probably for Cooper. Maybe not rule it out, but it would make it hard.
Remember, when you have 90 guys, you don't have to cross train. So, the Eagles generally do that later in the summer. You're going to see at some point, Bick's going to unveil the big nickel, as Sean Desai did last year with the 3 safety look. And that's where I think Cooper might fit.
And I think that makes a lot of sense, John. I think the big nickel makes sense when you have questions at linebacker, because now you can take advantage of the versatility you have at the safety position. But look, I think Howie Roseman deserves a lot of flowers for the draft and what he's done so far in free agency. But I saw an article yesterday by our friend Ruben Frank talking about kind of lauding him for all of these other teams' draft picks that he's signing. Talking about Kevin Pickett, Devin White, even Saquon Barkley, Devontae Parker, Paris Campbell, saying, look, this is a new strategy. That's not a new strategy. They did it last year, and it didn't work out. If you look at the 2023 Eagles, they brought in Rashad Penny, former first-round draft pick. He did nothing here. They brought in cornerback Greedy Williams. You remember that one? Everyone was all excited.
Second rounder. Yeah.
Didn't even make it out of training camp. Safety Justin Evans. Oh, second rounder as long as he stays healthy. Well, how did that end up? Didn't stay healthy. Then they brought in another first-round pick, Terrell Edmonds, safety from the Steelers. Everybody's, great move. They had to trade him to the Titans because they realized he couldn't play, and they tried to bring in Kevin Byard. They did the same thing with Miles Jack, former second-rounder. That didn't work out. So I don't know if this is necessarily a new strategy. He tried it last year. It didn't work. Now, other years it has. You look at some of the one-year deals he gave out before the Super Bowl season, 2017. They all hit. LeGarrette Blount, Chris Long, even was Peterson.
Patrick Robinson. Always start with Patrick Robinson.
The big pick 6 in the NFC Championship game.
He was the best nickel corner in football that year. One of the great anomalies of as so many things went right for that team. Patrick Robinson, a big part of it. Yeah. Chris Long had a great year as a rotation.
Well, you remember that pick 6, John, that Patrick Robinson had. Who hit
Chris
Case
Long.
Keenum's arm?
I would tell Jody all the time. Jody's like, pressure doesn't matter. I always go to the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, Chris Long got the arm.
People forget the Vikings got the ball, went straight down the field and scored. And people were like, oh my God, what's going on here? Then they stop the Eagles. They get the ball back. They're moving it a little bit. And you could hear the murmurs in the crowd and saying, what's going on here? And all of a sudden, Chris Long pressures Case Keenum, Patrick Robinson, pick six. The rest is history. They could hear the noise in South Jersey. The place exploded. I've never seen an exact moment where a crowd took the will of the other team, and Jonathan Gannon got here. He was with the Vikings at the time and has talked about it numerous times. The Vikings were favorite in that game. They had the best defense in football, and that just completely destroyed their will. And it was all because of the pressure of Chris Long. Thank you, Bill Colarulo. Yes. I hope you're listening, Jody.
I remember well. But I am excited to hear what Kellen Moore has to say today, though, because you look at this offense, and I've said this before, one of the areas that they really struggled last season, which surprised me, was in the yards after catch category. Because you go back to the Super Bowl season, they were top 5 in the NFL in average yards after catch. Well, they come back last year with pretty much the same personnel on offense, but you could argue they improved in the yak category because they replaced Miles Sanders with DeAndre Swift. Not debating who's a better running back, but you can't argue DeAndre Swift would be better with yak than Miles Sanders. Well, they go from top 5 in the NFL to 25th in the NFL last season. To me, that was play design and route concepts. So hopefully with a Kellen Moore, who even in LA last year, as bad as the Chargers offense was, they were top 5 in total yards after catch. So I'm excited to see what type of offense he can bring here to take advantage of your playmakers in space, because they have so many damn playmakers on offense. There's no reason why this team can't be in the top 5 of the NFL in yak. And I went and looked. You look at the top teams that were remaining in the NFL last year. San Francisco, number 1 in average yards after catch. The Kansas City Chiefs, number 2 in yards after catch. Well, who were your 2 last teams standing? The Chiefs and the 49ers.
Bill, what do you make of the structure? With you talked about Kellen Moore, obviously Nick Sirianni last year couldn't tell us enough how much it was his offense when everybody was busting on Brian Johnson. Is this a sustainable structure? Is there too much change year to year if Kellen succeeds as the play caller, as the offensive coordinator? What do you make of it?
Yeah, I guess the fear is if the Eagles do have a good year offensively, Kellen Moore may get a head coaching job next year. But it's just the reality of the NFL, unfortunately. But I don't love the fact that Jalen Hurts is now having another offensive coordinator. We heard all of the stories when he finally got Shane Steichen for back-to-back seasons. It was the first time since he was in high school they had offensive coordinators, and look how much he succeeded. But I do think, I know some fans get angry at this, who they want Nick Sirianni to have no involvement at all in the offense, that when he said there's going to be a blending of the offenses, fans lost their mind. I think it would be dumb to not have Sirianni involved, because you look at Sirianni and Jalen Hurts since they've been here, they've had a lot of success. So I think it would be ridiculous for Sirianni to say, hey, I'm not going to be involved at all in the offense because we haven't done anything correct since I've been here. That's completely false. So why wouldn't you take advantage of some of the things? I think Sirianni should be in Kellen Moore's ear saying, hey, look, over the years, this is what we've done that Jalen Hurts really succeeds with. These are some of the plays that we ran that really worked, because last year, as bad as things were down the stretch, they still were a top 10 offense in the NFL, which is crazy to me when you really think about it.
Number 8, number 1 third down defense. Number 1, Bill. Number 1. I'm sorry, number 1 fourth down defense, number 3 third down defense. The point is that offense was pretty good last year. Yes, it fell apart. The entire team fell apart late.
Well, it's turnovers too, John. I mean, turnovers played a big part in.
I argue that's the only difference between 2023 and 2022, the turnovers.
Yeah. Jalen Hurts went from 8 in 2022 to 20 in 2023. That can sink any offense. And I'm not expecting him to have that type of season this year where he has that many turnovers. I think he'll have a bounce back year. So I do want Sirianni involved a little bit in the offense, but I am excited to see what Kellen Moore brings, because Kellen Moore, you're talking about an offensive coordinator who was the play caller on the #1 offense in the NFL when he was in Dallas. And there's that quote. This is what really bothers me. There's that quote from Mike McCarthy where he says, Kellen wants to light up the scoreboard and I want him to run the damn football, right? So I went and looked. In Kellen Moore's last year as offensive coordinator in Dallas, they ran the ball 531 times. That was top 6 in the NFL in rushing attempts. Well, then Mike McCarthy takes over the offense last season. He runs it 468 times. So Mike McCarthy actually ran the ball substantially less than Kellen Moore did. So I think that quote was just a bunch of BS from McCarthy.
Yeah, I'm going to defend Mike McCarthy, which is never an easy thing, but because people just don't like him. I think he's been proven himself as a good NFL head coach. Not great, but solid. Many good years in Green Bay, many good years in Dallas. But you get judged on the final result. We all know that. What Mike was trying to say in his entire, because there was an entire sort of dissertation, what he was talking about, he was essentially talking about managing the game in situations. Like I complain about the Sixers. I don't give a crap what happens in the first 43 minutes, Bill. How do you manage a close game at the end?
Yeah.
And he was talking about, that's when you got the feel. That's when, all right, now it's time to close the game. 4-minute offense. Maybe don't push, maybe take your foot off the gas pedal a little bit, understanding that type of situation. I think that's very true. I think it's very valuable to have that trait as a play caller. I also think it's very hard. And the NFL is about putting points on the scoreboard and explosion. And it's very difficult and very esoteric to say, hey, you know what? Maybe laying up, let's go to golf. Laying up is better than trying to tin cup everything at all points. I think that's what he was trying to say. And I think he's right, but I don't think it's as easy as it seems when you
great movie too, John. Good reference to Tin Cup. Good movie.
Yeah. It is a good movie. And that's what he was talking about. Now, does Kellen Moore have that ability? I don't know. We're going to see. And to me, it's the most interesting part of this whole thing is the dynamic with Nick Sirianni, because I'm with you, Bill. It's silly to say they haven't done anything well on offense. They won at one point, they won 25 of 27 games.
Yeah.
I mean, they were doing something right. And Kellen Moore doesn't have a history with a quarterback like this who has that +1 in the running game.
Yeah.
That little bit mobility, not like Jalen. Justin Herbert's a phenomenal quarterback, but he doesn't have that +1 ability, even though he's got some athleticism. You're going to take that out of the offense? I don't think that's a prudent thing to do.
So this was crazy. I gave this stat on the Fanatic, one of my weekend shows. You look at Jalen Hurts' career. He has 20 losses in his career as a starting quarterback. 16 of those losses came when he had 10 or less carries. When he has more than 10 carries, Jalen Hurts is 16-4. He has an .800 winning percentage. When he has more than 14 carries in a game, now I'm not suggesting that he should, but when he has 14 or more carries in a game, Jalen Hurts 10-0 as a starter. So
yeah, I mean,
got to utilize his legs.
That +1 in the running game makes it so difficult because you put everybody in conflict. That's all offensive coaches say now. You want to put defenders in conflict. And that's what Jalen Hurts does. And if you take that away from him and try to turn him into a pocket quarterback, whether for whatever reason, because Kellen Moore is more comfortable with that type of quarterback, or you're trying to protect his health, which you can't do. I don't think that's a good strategy to take away, as Nick Sirianni described it at one point, his superpower. I don't think it makes any sense. Is the longevity going to be the same as Tom Brady? No. Stipulate that. Move on. Try to take advantage of what you have is the way I think the Eagles will and should go about it, in my estimate. I don't think they should change. as he gets older, maybe it becomes that natural evolution.
Yeah, his game will evolve naturally,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. But to actually sit there and do it as a strategy, I think that would be the worst case scenario for the Philadelphia Eagles.
To me, Kellen Moore is either going to be great at using Jalen Hurts as +1, or he's not going to use it at all, and he's going to learn the hard way. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see.
I think he will. What's interesting was I was looking at how many times Kellen Moore called the RPO last year, and even with Justin Herbert as his quarterback, the stat I found was that he called the third most run pass option plays in the NFL last year, which is interesting because he didn't have a very mobile quarterback. So do we get a more effective RPO with a Kellen Moore? Because you look at the offense this year, as much as I'm agreeing with John that I think a lot of it was turnovers, the RPO became ineffective with the Philadelphia Eagles this year. They called it just as much. If you look at how many times they called it, they did call it a lot. It's just that it went from averaging in 2022 when they called the RPO, they averaged 7.8 yards per RPO play. Last year when they called it, they only averaged 4.8 yards per RPO play. That's from Pro Football Stats. So when it dropped over 3 yards an RPO play, to me, that was, you had to figure out different designs for potentially how you called that or how you ran it, because once teams figured out how to take it away, I felt like Brian Johnson and even Nick Sirianni, they couldn't adjust to figure out how they could make it effective again.
And that's where I think Saquon Barkley will be the biggest add for this offense. If they can figure out how to use the RPO, and I'm counting on Jalen to actually use Saquon in more ways than just running, throwing him a little bit more out of the backfield. You talked about Yak. Saquon is great at that. I'd love to see him throw to the ball out of the backfield. I guess that will come down to both Jalen and Kellen.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking about Chip Kelly a lot today because after he gets murdered
roasted
in
from
podcast
Deshaun and LaShawn,
the roast of Chip Kelly after the roast of Tom Brady. But
podcast comes out at 11 o'clock today, I think.
To bring Chip taught me back in the day, one of the few things, because he's not very, all run pass options are not created equal. The Eagles ran, when Chip was here, the Eagles run a lot of RPOs with Sam Bradford. Well, they're really zone reads. I mean, but that they have the RPO mechanics. Well,
Foles ran it a little bit too.
Because Nick was comfortable with it. Same thing with Justin Herbert. Where's he come from? Same thing with Nick. Where's he come from? To them, it's play action. It's just another form of play action. So the traditional play action where you just bake it to the running back, and we all think same thing with that type of quarterback, because there is no run option. The run option is taken away in the case of Nick Foles by the fact that everybody knows, or even more so Sam Bradford, everybody knows he's not running it. So it's taken away. In the case of Justin Herbert, a little bit more because he's got some athleticism, but it's real with Jalen Hurts. So they're not all created equal, and the Eagles will call it at times a run-pass-run option, where you have three options because he might pull it back off the pass if he decides that and then go back to the run. Their RPOs are much more threatening than other people's RPOs, whether it's Dallas, wherever Kellen was, maybe not Baltimore, but
I would say definitely not Baltimore.
What Chip would tell you is, it's not an RPO, it's a zone read. And basically, Sam Bradford obviously is not going to run the ball. So it takes that off. The mechanics look the same, but the impact is not the same on the defense. The Eagles have that impact because the threat is there, and that the threat is the key. Defenses did a better job stopping it last year, no question about it, and they made the adjustment, and the Eagles got to make the adjustment back. But just to compare it to the mechanics of an RPO elsewhere with a non-threatening quarterback, that's probably not the way to go because they don't have the threat, and the threat is meaningful for Philadelphia. So why are you trying to take that away would be my argument. I'm not taking that away.
No, I think they have to utilize it. Look, you look at the traditional pocket passers. realistically, what you're looking at is it's 10 offensive players versus 11 defenders because the quarterback's not a threat to do anything but hand it off or throw it. But when you add a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, who has the ability to run, it truly almost becomes 11 on 10, because when you're running that RPO, you're not even blocking the edge. You're just reading him. So now you don't even have to worry about that edge. Jalen Hurts is just reading him. So now you've turned what's normally 10 on 11 to 11 on 10. That's why I love the RPO.
And that's why they call it +1 in the running game.
Yep.
Yeah. Little math lesson.
So you get it all on Birds 365.
Yeah, good breakdown there, Bill. Bill, what are you looking forward to most from a storyline perspective? The draft is now in the rear view. We're coming up on training camp. Well, not yet, but coming up on OTAs, coming up on training camp. There's the defensive backs room is very deep. The offensive guard, the right guard position, the wide receiver 3. What are you looking for most? What storyline are you most interested in going into camp?
Well, until training camp, I want no storylines, because usually when things happen over the
not
summer,
happening, Bill.
It's
This is
bad.
Philadelphia.
Yeah, you don't want all that drama. No, but in training camp, what I'm really looking forward to seeing is how the defense shapes up as far as who's starting, because there's a lot of question marks. Who are going to be your starting corners? Is Quinyon Mitchell going to crack the lineup? Is Kelee Ringo? I know a lot of people are excited about him, but we haven't really seen him play. And even in Indianapolis, as well as he played, he didn't play that much while he was in Indianapolis. So I'm excited to see what happens in the secondary. And then I am excited, tempering my expectations. He's a 5th-round rookie, but I am excited to see what Jeremiah Trotter Jr. can do at that linebacker position, because everything you hear about him is just how smart of a player he is. And I had Joe Santoliquito on The Fanatic talking about how he spent the draft night with the Trotters, and then he talked to them after Trotter was drafted, and that the first thing Trot Sr. said to his son was, time to get to work. And they're already watching film of Vic Fangio's defense on how he utilizes his linebackers. So I'm excited to see what this rookie can do if he's really has that high of a football IQ.
Bill, you made a good point. Last one for you at Bill Colarulo. Make sure you follow Bill on X. What time are you on today? 97.5.
Today I'm going to be on from 10 to 2. I'm running the show today because Bob Cooney's off, so I'll be joined by Amy Fadul for the full 4 hours. So that'll be fun.
So tune in to Bill this morning, 10 to 2. You made an interesting point about Jalen Carter, which I agree with wholeheartedly from this perspective. He's the best rookie in the NFL last season, defensive. Now, you can argue Will Anderson because he won Rookie of the Year, and Jalen came in second. But to me, that was about the Texans got hot down the stretch. The Eagles fell apart. If you look at the film, the best rookie in the NFL was Jalen Carter. Period. End of sentence. Your rookies aren't going to be that good. And that wasn't good enough. So from that standpoint, I think you should temper the expectations, because if we want to tie this whole conversation in a bow from where we started, I think the Eagles' collapse was under the weight of expectations. And if you're going to go down that same route, and Jalen Carter wasn't good enough last year as a rookie, which he was. I'm not trying to say he wasn't. He was phenomenal. But you're expecting that kind of production out of Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, especially if we truly have Super Bowl aspirations, which I think we always do in this town. You can't rely on rookies that much. Now, what I will say, though, is I am going to be relying on second-year players, because I think second-year players need to start to take that leap, Jalen Carter being one of them. I think Kelee Ringo needs to take a leap, but I really want to see Nolan Smith take that leap this year, because you traded away Hassan Reddick. I know you brought in Bryce Huff. You still have Josh Sweat, but I think that they are really relying on Nolan Smith to take that leap. And not only second-year players. We need some third-year guys to really step up, probably none bigger than Nakobe Dean.
Bill, last one for me, a follow-up on Jalen Carter. You mentioned the rookie wall. Do you attribute it all to the rookie wall, or do you attribute some of it to the change in play caller? They go to Matt Patricia, defense kind of falls apart. Jalen Carter becomes basically non-existent not non-existent, but way less productive, far less productive down the stretch. Any merit to that?
Probably a combination of both. I know I saw some film towards the end of the season about some of the designs of the defensive line where they were.
There's a lot of freelancing going on.
Yes. So I'm sure that played a part in it as well. But the rookie wall is a real thing. Jalen Carter's not the first one to succumb to it. I mean, almost every rookie hits that wall because it is different. I mean, you're talking about 18-week season now, which is probably going to 19 or 20 weeks if Roger Goodell has his way. When they go to an 18-game season, it'll probably be a 20-week season. So a lot different than what you get in college football, especially with college. You get that month off before the bowl games. So it's just a completely different animal. So I think it was probably a combination.
Yeah, it's a good point. It is a way different schedule. We'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. Bill, thanks for joining the show, man. Oh, great as always. Make sure you guys tune in to Bill today on 97.5 The Fanatic from 10 to 2. Bill doing great work over at The Fanatic. Bill's going big time on us here at JAKIB.
Oh, man. I'm trying to hopefully I'll be joining you guys every week. I miss my JAKIB crew. So I think Zander's kicking ass on this show lately. John always bringing the heat, but appreciate you guys having me.
Appreciate it, Bill. Thanks, man.
Appreciate it, man.
We'll talk to you next week. All right.
See you guys.
See it. There's Bill Colarulo joining us. Always great to hear from Bill. I loved Bill's show when he was on JAKIB Sports. Does a great job and is really acclimated quick to the Philadelphia media scene coming from a former lawyer. So Bill's doing great work. We'll get to our commercial break. We'll talk a little bit about Jeffrey Lurie coming up next. And then in hour number 2, we have Bob Brookover from NJ.com who wrote some good articles. And we'll get his thoughts on all the latest in Eagle Land. So stay tuned, everybody. Make sure you hit the like button on your way. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll be right back after the break.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow, to get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. A Thursday Coordinator Day edition of Birds 365. Eagles' new coordinator set to meet with the media today, so Johnny Mack will be down there 1 p.m. it's scheduled to start, so we'll see if they're on time, and we'll see what they have to say. A lot of good storylines around the coordinators. We just hit them all in hour number 1, so we'll talk more about that later with Bob Brookover, who's coming up at 9:20. Johnny Mac, we didn't hit on this earlier in the week, and everybody was talking about it, and I do want to give a nod to him. 30 years of ownership now for Jeffrey Lurie. Pretty good stuff. Pretty incredible numbers under Jeffrey Lurie when you compare him to previous Eagles owners. They were not good. They were before my time, but when you read about it, you're like, wow, that was not pretty. 17 playoff wins. He's got 3 NFC titles, 1 Super Bowl, and in the 30 years, they've won more games than all but 5 teams. So pretty incredible ownership so far for Jeffrey Lurie. We talk about it all the time, how he's willing to write the checks, how he's willing to go the distance or do what he needs to do to put the team in a position to succeed. What's your thoughts on Jeffrey Lurie's 30 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. I think the best indication of, because you have a whole generation of people, and even past the generation of people who have no idea what it was like to follow a bad football team. And there have been the outlier bad seasons. The best indications of that would be, to me, the NFC East championships, because the Eagles have, I believe the number is 10 in Jeffrey Lurie's history, 30 years. So 33% of the time they're going to win the division. Before that, they had 2 NFC East titles. That's it. And I got to look up when the NFC East started, but I mean, it was such a big deal when they finally beat the Cowboys with Wilbert Montgomery, and because they were just destroyed every year. The consistency is built up, and Andy Reid's a big part of this, but look, it all starts with him. And we talked about the contracts. You can't get these contracts done. The receivers are the best indication. So far this offseason, we got Landon Dickerson, Jake Elliott, then it was Jordan Mailata, then it was Devontae, then it was AJ. And the receivers are probably the best indication of this, because there are so many other receivers ready to get their next deal, starting with Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk. All these guys are going to make more than AJ Brown. In the moment, go back to last year with Jalen Hurts. For a very brief moment, Jalen Hurts was the highest paid player in the history of football.
I think it was like a week.
Yeah. I don't even think it was a week.
Yeah, it was
and
a
then
couple
Lamar
days.
signed. And now how many players have surpassed? The reason the Eagles can be so proactive is because of the ownership, and Jeffrey's willing to pay out these large sums to get a better deal on the back end, where other teams pay a tax, a penalty, whatever you want to call it. They might even have to trade some of those players I mentioned, because those players are angry that these teams won't ante up market value. He's a big part of setting the whole process, setting the culture. So yeah, it's 18 playoff appearances in 30 years. So it's more likely than not that the Eagles are going to make the playoffs in the Jeffrey Lurie era. 10 NFC East titles, 7 NFC championship games, 3 Super Bowls, and 1 Lombardi trophy. Do you wish they had more? Certainly. It's really difficult. The one thing they haven't been able to do is get the Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes that puts you that leg ahead. Then you're probably talking about outrageous numbers. But for consistency, and again, the continuity, I always talk about, Howie Roseman can do things other GMs can't. I can't say that enough. Guys can't do what he can do. And that's not an insult to Howie Roseman, but it's reality. Like a lot of people say,
Howie, if you watch the unscripted of the draft room, Howie actually gave credit for what you just said about Jeffrey Lurie, giving them that leg up to be able to go and do what they want to do and sign the players they want to sign.
And he's made a mistake. His biggest mistake, he admits, was taking that power away from Howie for a brief time during Chip Kelly. We're talking about Chip too much, but because of the day and what's going to be going on, mistakes. But that's probably the best thing about him. All owners have egos. He certainly has one. You have, they're very rich people. You saw him in the war room during Cooper DeJean. He probably gets too involved on a personal aspect, and that's where Howie deserves the most credit because he manages Jeffrey very well. Jeffrey probably doesn't want to hear that reverse, but he does, and by that I mean he controls him very effectively. He corrects mistakes. He made a big mistake with Chip Kelly, but he corrects.
Well, here's the thing, though. Do you think I agree that it was obviously Chip Kelly was a mistake? But did that process turn Howie Roseman into the GM he is today?
Yes.
I don't know if Howie's as good as he is today.
I've written about that numerous times. Howie Roseman 1.0 doesn't turn into Howie Roseman 2.0 unless it's taken away from him. And he learned from his own failings. So, yeah, that was the silver lining of it. You had to take the 2 steps back to take in this case, the 3 steps forward to win the Super Bowl. Yeah, he's completely I don't even look. I always say there's 2 different. A lot of people you see leading up to the draft go to Howie's history and go back to 2011 or whatever. I don't even bother. He's a completely different guy. To me, the only meaningful part of it is when he came back, and how he's handled himself since that point. And he's been the best GM in the NFL since that point. He went out and talked to Brian Cashman and talked to the San Antonio general. I know he's talking to the guy who ran Manchester United at the time. All these successful sports executives to try to learn, how they did it. And he's been a completely different guy, and he's been a much more successful GM, the second version. And that probably doesn't happen. I would argue definitely doesn't happen if he's not set adrift and set to the other side of the building. But Jeffrey, yeah, he's a great owner. And he sets the tone and from the contract standpoint to the allowing his football people to do their job. If I were to nitpick, the first thing I would do is he's too scapegoatish, which I say all the time. When the expectations are not reached, he acts too quickly. He wants 1 or 2 people to blame it on, and it's not usually a problem that you can blame on 1 or 2 people and assume it's going to be fixed. And sometimes it goes backwards when he does that.
Yeah, here's another nitpick that I do agree with. But again, it is his team. He's very involved in the draft picks. You did see that in the video. He loved the Cooper DeJean pick. But look, it's his team. He's a billionaire. He bought the damn team. He built it up. It's his whole wealth. What are you gonna do? I mean, yeah,
it's his team. He can do whatever he wants. I mean, there are far more. And that's where Howie does a good job. When I say Howie manages him, he keeps that stuff under control, at least for the most part. We all laughed at Jeffrey when he said he was only involved with 3 draft picks, and they all happened to be hits. Russell Wilson was one. Jordan Mailata was one. I think Lane was the other one. I don't know, but they were only tremendous. Oh, I wanted Russell Wilson. And now people have turned on Russell, but obviously at his height, it would have been a very good pick.
Definitely. 3rd round pick with the success Russell Wilson's had. I don't care what he does now. That's a successful
One
pick.
of the reasons the Eagles drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside was because of Jeffrey Lurie. So yeah, I mean, he's too involved with draft picks. But he loves it. So what are you going to tell the guy worth billions who owns the team to shut up? You got to manage that, and Howie does a good job.
Yeah, I agree. The one other thing that I I don't know if this is Jeffrey. It might not be Jeffrey. I think it probably is Jeffrey, though. That I'll say pisses me off as a longtime fan of the Eagles. As I grew up right outside of Philadelphia, I've been rooting for this team my whole life. Like when you move on from Doug Peterson right after the Super Bowl because he wanted his own coordinators, like that irks me. Maybe I have the wrong perspective of it, but Doug Peterson has your only Super Bowl in franchise history. Did he not earn the autonomy to hire a coordinator? And that gets on my nerves, and that's why I think
I had a problem. I had a problem with that.
And I think that's why they like Sirianni so much, because he's willing to bend the knee for them, I think, and they love that.
Yeah, well, they definitely want. He's too involved with coaching aspects when things don't meet expectations. And I would argue, if he looked in the mirror and thought about that, when things are going well, he doesn't care. And if you don't care when things are going well, you're probably not in the position to be making those decisions when things are not going well. So you got to know where your expertise is. And obviously his expertise is not hiring coaches from the standpoint. I'm not talking about head coaches. I'm talking about the mechanics of position coaches and things like that. There's not an NFL owner that exists, even if you want to go back to Jerry Richardson, who played in the league, who's probably equipped to do that. And you have to notice, but from his perspective, he's done a good job hiring head coaches. So he probably thinks, well, man, why are you even worried about position coaches like Press Taylor? Why? Right.
Where I would just prefer him to leave it to the football.
One week he's a rising star. Oh, he's a great young coach. He's this, he's that. And the next week, oh, we got to get rid of Press Taylor. We can't do Press. It makes no sense on the surface. And yeah, I mean, that would be number one. If I said, what can he do better? Stop scapegoating people. Maybe the expectations were off track, and if you look at it that way, maybe you have a little bit more patience when it comes to the coaching staff, because continuity is always better than the alternative. And there's a possibility, I'm not saying there isn't, there's a possibility that guys deserve to be fired and guys are so bad behind the scenes, but that becomes self-evident. Like if that's what happened with Sean Desai, all right, I guess then you start looking at your process and why you hired him in the first place. But that's where I would say, because your expectations were wrong, don't go looking for scapegoats.
I guess it's easy to say your expectations are what they are when you're writing checks the size that Jeffrey Lurie is. Hey man, I want some wins. I want this or I want that.
He's been around for 30 years. He knows the industry and he knows how hard it is to win in this league. And to come off a Super Bowl season with the assumption of, Doug's biggest mistake was probably uttering the new normal, yet acting like, they were going to be the next Patriots, which is near and dear to Jeffrey's heart, obviously. Yeah. But you don't have Tom Brady. You don't have Patrick Mahomes. So you unless you get that player, those are the cheat codes. There's not going to be as much consistency.
I would have loved to have seen Doug Peterson with Jalen Hurts. I got to be honest. I think back to those. Jalen played 4 games. I think it was 4 games, right, to finish out that season, his rookie year. He looked great in that Cardinals game, his rookie year. I forget how the game ended or anything, but I got to say, I would have loved to see a Doug P offense tailored to Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I mean, now it's, it was pretty good for whatever that stretch was. 27, 28 games. I don't know if the Eagles have ever, in fact, I do know the Eagles have never had a more successful stretch in their history. So I don't know how much better it could have been.
Yeah. You're talking about when they hired from when they hired Nick.
No, because they started 2-5. So
I think they
at
went
one
9-7
point,
that year. Yeah.
at one point they won 25 of 27 games, I believe was at one point. And that's the most successful stretch of Eagles football in history. And I don't know how much better it can get from that. Now, how do you keep that consistency up? Well, again, Jeffrey Lurie knows you can't keep that up. You can't keep those numbers up. You can't follow 25-2 with 25-2. Even Peyton Manning and Tom Brady didn't do that on a consistent basis. So he should understand that there's going to be ebbs and flows. Now, it can't be as ugly as it was at the end of last season. And that's sort of what we're all trying to figure out. How can you be so good for so long and then fall off a cliff? That's troublesome. But as I advocated, I wouldn't have fired Nick Sirianni. He ended up that way. I think he would have fired Nick Sirianni if Nick walked in, as Doug did once back in the day, and said, you know what? Brian Johnson's got to stay. I think he would have been fired. So I'm not sure how you want to weigh that.
They neutered him. They neutered Nick. They didn't fire him. They neutered him. They took away his power.
I would agree with that.
That's where I wonder, who are these coordinators answering to? Are they answering to Nick, or are they answering?
Yeah, they are answering to Nick in the form of,
day-to-day task out on the practice field. But I'm talking about when Monday comes after the game, they're not answering to Nick. I don't think.
Yeah, they are. But they're answering to Nick with in other words, if it's going bad and the Eagles are 4-4, let's say, and Nick wants to take a bigger part in the offensive play calling. He doesn't want to call plays. He said that pretty consistently, but he wants to be back to what like it was before,
right?
And having the overall autonomy. Could he do that? Probably not. But I think there's a very misconstrued perception of the Eagles' power structure. Nick Sirianni doesn't report to Howie Roseman. He reports
right.
directly to Jeffrey Lurie, as does Howie on the football ops side. So the coaching staff, it's not like Howie's. I think there's perception that Howie's controlling the coaching staff. That's not the case.
It's more Jeffrey. And that's where I think you talked about scapegoats. And that's the one thing you would nitpick about Jeffrey. Nick doesn't have scapegoats anymore. No, he's not going to be able to scapegoat his coordinators again.
No, he's not. But Jeffrey's not getting involved during the weeks. He's not that egomaniacal. He's not. He knows.
Are we sure? Because there was that famous interview with Doug Peterson when they won the ball from running the game, or they won the game from running the ball.
No. I'm saying, yes, he's definitely involved with the head coach. I'm saying he's not involved with the assistants.
Right.
He's not that, kind of off the reservation, which, he knows. But to me, that makes it worse when you decide to step in and say, no, Brian Johnson can't be the offensive coordinator. No. In the case, look, the defensive coordinator was getting fired either way because of what happened. But when you do step in, that to me is problematic. And that's pretty much my only criticism of Jeffrey Lurie. The rest of it's been pretty good, especially when we're going to have Brookie on. He's in the green room.
Yeah, we're going to get to a break. Get to Bob.
Brookie remembers when the Eagles before Jeffrey Lurie. It wasn't great.
No, I read Bob Brookover's article on NJ.com. It was pitiful. It was before my time, but man, just reading about it, it sounded pitiful. So they tried to move the team to Phoenix or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
A whole shit show. But let's get to a commercial timeout. Coming up next is Bob Brookover from NJ.com. Don't forget to like the show, everybody, if you're enjoying Birds 365. Let's at least get to 100 likes today. We're only at 70. So let's see if we can get that number up. We'll hit a commercial timeout. And on the other side, Bob Brookover from NJ.com.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Valle Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365. We are joined now by Bob Brookover from NJ.com. Bob, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good, Brookie. Excited for Coordinator Day. On
Finally,
your
it's
level
here.
of 1 to 10 of excitement, give me your level.
I say like an 8 or a 9. We've waited a long time for this.
Yeah, we
You've
have.
been hired for a couple months.
Who are you more excited to hear from, Kellen or Vic?
Probably Vic, because the defense was such a disaster last year. The offense was pretty good for a while. I guess the defense was early on too. Everything just completely fell apart. They fell apart in unison. I could say Michael Clay, but that would be a lie. But yeah, I would say Vic, because I think there's been some moving parts here. Son Reddick out, Bryce Huff in. Are you deep enough there? What are you going to do at linebacker? How you feel about all your cornerbacks? You got a lot of cornerbacks to sift through here. But is James Bradbury? Why is he still here? Is he going to be here? So I think there's more questions for Vic to answer, but there's plenty for Kellen Moore to answer too.
Yeah, just the dynamic of Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni. I mean, That to me is going to be the most compelling story of the entire Eagles season, Brookie, is how those two coexist. And it's not as easy. Vick's in charge of the defense, right? I mean, that's set in stone. Offensively, it's like, where are we? That to me is the most interesting narrative of the entire season.
Yeah, I don't think Nick has much of a choice but to let Kellen run his offense. I mean, he can have input. It's almost like the roles are reversed, where Kellen is in charge of the offense, and as almost like if you have a head coach who calls the plays. In those cases, the offensive coordinator has input, but he doesn't call the plays. We're looking at it reverse. But I mean, you got to remember, Nick didn't call the plays. It's not like he's always called the plays since he's been here. So
he doesn't even want to call the plays. He said that before pretty consistently when he decided to give it up to Shane.
Right. Well, and this is the first time where, his imprint is not the main thing, going to be the main thing on the offense, where, he
can that work though? Can that work?
Find out.
That to me seems like we're just talking about Jeffrey Lurie, and I want to get into Jeffrey Lurie with you as well. I think he's a great owner. But if there's one thing I'm going to nitpick about, is that when this team doesn't reach his preconceived expectations, he goes looking for scapegoats. And I think that's what happened this offseason. We all know who they were. I don't think that's a good way to go about things. And to have a head coach, and whether you think I think it was Nick was a smart enough political animal to realize he couldn't go into Jeffrey's office and say, Brian Johnson's got to be back. He's got to be given an opportunity to grow on the job. I don't think Jeffrey said, you got to fire Brian Johnson, because I think Nick was too smart. He read the room. Either way, that was the end game. I don't like it. I don't think it's a good situation, Brookie.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back. What I didn't like was in the middle of the season, the Sean Desai move, because it just
that I also didn't like.
That was terrible.
It reeked of panic. It didn't work. It was a disaster. Things went much deeper than who was calling the plays on defense. If you go back and look at the season, the defense was kind of falling apart in pieces there, and injuries being a big part of that. Slay going down for 3 or 4 weeks. Bradbury just never played well. The linebackers were going down with injuries, and Jordan Davis was running out of gas midseason. I mean, there were a lot of things wrong beyond what was being called defense. What was being the play calls were defensively. And to your point about Jeffrey, yeah, I mean, but he's not unique. I mean, he might be unique in an owner being so involved in having scapegoats. But I go back to the Andy Reid era. Sean McDermott has one bad season as a defensive coordinator. And Andy panics and makes Juan Castillo the defensive coordinator. I mean, forever, there's always people being the scapegoats, and often it's the the head coach or the general manager, trying to save their own jobs. I mean, one of my favorite stories I've written this offseason was Jim writing about the elder Jim Moore when Vic Fangio was his defensive coordinator in Indianapolis, and Irsay wanted to fire. He got together for his post-season meeting with Jim Moore, and he said, yeah, we're going to do this and this and this, and it'll all be great, but you got to fire Vic. And Jim Moore and when I interviewed him, he was in that voice, the playoffs. He's like, fire Vic. I'm not firing Vic. And he didn't. And he got fired, which is you're seldom going to see. These guys are going to do what they can to, and I'm not saying they didn't need to move on from Brian Johnson, but to your point, it's going to be fascinating to see how Kellen Moore and Nick coexist in these roles. I mean, it almost has to be that Nick has to put his ego out of the way here and say, all right, you run the offense, Kellen. I'm in charge of culture, which has been the messaging this offseason. I'm going to make sure this culture is right. which, not a small thing because it seemed like the culture had lost its way in the middle of last
Man,
season.
you better talk to Kenny Gainwell ASAP.
Yeah.
Right. That was an interesting little development. Kenny Gainwell, who could, it was hard to get any running back in that locker room to speak last year. They were all,
not Rashad Penny, Brookie. Rashad's a great dude. Rashad Penny never played, so nobody wanted to talk to him. But
I did actually talk to him once.
Yeah, he was willing to
he
talk.
Was the guy. I wanted to do a story on the running backs, and it's like, got to get somebody from the running back room. It was Rashad Penny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brookie, how much should we be expecting? And maybe it's not at all, because the last 3 years we've essentially been running the Vic Fangio defense, but now we got the guy in the room. How much should we expect to see different about this defense other than the different players? Is it just how you're using the players? What should we expect to change on the defensive side of the ball if we're essentially using the same defense?
Yeah, I think Vic will have more moving parts maybe than these other guys. You'll see more innovation because it is his defense. The question, one of the questions, and one of the reasons I'm interested in Vic today too, is it seemed like they really in Miami, in his 1 year in Miami, the Dolphins players thought Vic was really smart, brilliant, but maybe was not as in touch with today's player as he needs to be. I think Vic needs to address those accusations too today, and that'll be interesting. Vic's obviously old school. When I talk about a guy who, who got protected by Jim Moore, who's been out of the game for more than a decade. Vic coached the Philadelphia Stars.
Yeah, Damo. I was going to bring up Damo. Damo covered him.
That was my first pro stuff I ever covered was the Philadelphia Stars when I was still in college. So I'll be honest, I don't remember Vic, but I'm sure Vic doesn't remember me either.
A great what a great team that was, by the way.
Oh, they were good. I would have loved to see them play the Eagles at that time. It would have been a game.
Yeah. To wrap up, because you did a nice piece on 30 years of the Eagles under Jeffrey Lurie, and comparing it to the rest of the NFL over at NJ.com. Read Brookie there. You know the Eagles prior to Jeffrey Lurie and post Jeffrey Lurie. It's pretty stinking good. I'm nitpicking. Pretty stinking good compared.
No, it's been good. It's not, and I brought this up in the story, Lurie will always be famous for, after the 2002 season, he made the gold standard comment, which really rang hollow after losing 2 straight NFC championships. And oddly, the Patriots weren't the Patriots yet. They had won a Super Bowl, but they weren't really the Patriots yet. They had only won 1 Super Bowl, but and that was his boyhood team. But the Eagles weren't the gold standard either. You could make a case at that time the Rams were, the 49ers and Cowboys weren't that far removed from winning championships at that time. But the Eagles definitely weren't the gold standard, and they're still not the gold standard. They're very good. This is Jeffrey Lurie, far and away the best owner the Eagles have ever had. I think he's been helped very much by the fact that at the outset he had Joe Banner as his right-hand man, who was a really smart guy, understood the league, and was ahead of the curve on the salary cap. And he was replaced by Howie Roseman, also a very smart guy, also knows the ins and outs of the salary cap and how to do things. But they haven't been the gold standard. The gold standard is still the Patriots.
Well, you're right. And every once in a while, I would say this has happened more. They say stupid shit like that. They'll say gold standard. They'll say quarterback factory. They'll say GM factory. Which,
no hoagies in the link. That might have been the worst one of all for the fans.
So I mean, the messaging has been off, but to me, the more important part is what he's done in building this organization. As you mentioned, Joe deserves a lot of credit, especially for getting ahead of the game when it comes to the cap. Andy deserves most of the credit, but because he's built the whole foundation of how this organization acts.
He did.
And
Bob
continues
Lamont,
to this day.
Bob Lamont, Andy's agent, used to say to me, the Eagles were irrelevant before Andy got there, and and Andy made them relevant, and
Yeah.
that's absolutely true. And they've managed to maintain it. You know, speaking of gold standards, Kansas City's the gold standard in the NFL right
Yeah.
now. And who's
Yeah.
their coach?
Yeah.
So,
Brookie, I want to
and-
go to the. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just saying Andy is the key to it all. But Jeffrey is an owner, and you can see this. To recognize when you have good employees, that's a valuable trait that most owners don't have, to be honest.
no, yeah, he's and you know he's hired. This may be my favorite. Jeffrey Lurie, during his tenure as the owner, they've hired, what is it, 5 now? Whatever the number, 5 or 6, however many coaches they've hired, every one of them has gone to the playoffs at least once. So
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a bust in any of them in terms of you know, some of them fade quickly.
Chip,
Chip, yeah, we'll talk more about tomorrow.
And even Ray Rhodes, his first hire was, you know, it was brought in brimstone and fire, but then it didn't last, and which often doesn't. But you know, and Nick's first 3 years better than any of them.
Yeah.
You know,
I was just talking about the stretch where they won so many games, whatever it was, 25 of 27, 26 of 28, I forget. But that was the best stretch of Eagles football ever. I mean, ever. They just kept winning and winning and winning. That's what makes the collapse last year so strange. It's like, how do you go from that, winning that consistently, and then falling completely off a cliff? I don't think any of us know. But Kenny Gainwell tried to explain it. I'm not sure I understand Kenny Gainwell's explanation. He started off talking about connection, Brookie. Then he ended up with what I felt was a confidence issue. And I lean more towards the confidence. They got punched in the face by San Francisco and Dallas back-to-back weeks. And I think they all said, we're not good enough. These guys are better than us. And they never recovered.
No, it's true. You know, there's things too where you wonder if they hold on to win that Seattle game, does that turn the tide a little bit? And then I remember going to the Tampa Bay, and I was in a weird position because I never really saw good Eagles. I saw them beat Kansas City, and then the Bills at home, and those were 2 good games. And then I just saw nothing but bad after that. But then you go into the Tampa Bay game, and you don't have AJ Brown, Devontae Smith's banged up, Jalen Hurts is banged up, the defense.
No Reed Blankenship, if you want to throw that in.
Right, no Reed Blankenship. I mean, it was disaster. And somebody asked me, how can you pick against the Eagles in this game? Tampa Bay's not. I said, have you watched the Eagles for the last 7 weeks? I mean, to me, it was a no-brainer that the Eagles weren't winning that game. I
admit, when I was flying down to Tampa, I thought there was no way Nick Sirianni was getting fired. And I thought even if they lost, and I thought people who would bring that up, I'd say you're just being silly. Look at what he's done. And then coming back, I was like, all right, he might get fired. That was such a disastrous performance.
That felt. I had that feeling after they lost to the Giants the last game, and I know it didn't. You know, in the big picture, it didn't mean anything because the Cowboys won that day and they were going to win the division. But it was just like I guess because I covered the bad Giants too. It's like, you know, how do you get beat by the Giants like that? I mean, it just blew my mind.
Yeah, speaking of Nick Sirianni, and I want to keep it on the coordinators, what do you make of the sustainability of this new setup? When they hired Nick, he started as the play caller. He starts 2-5, and then he gives the play calling to Shane Steichen. Then they have a great Super Bowl run. They bring in Brian Johnson. They scapegoat him. Now it's Kellen Moore's offense. It's now Nick is even more removed, I would say, from the offense. Is this a sustainable setup with the head coach and the offensive coordinator if Nick is no longer really having a big part in the offense? And I think he will have a small part, but it's certainly not the same size as when he was first hired here.
It's all about winning and losing in my mind. If you win and it's working and you're moving the ball and you're putting up points, you know, the wins, even if the offense isn't Nick's, the wins go under his name. It's not going to say Kellen Moore's record as offensive coordinator. I mean, somewhere you can find that, I'm sure, but it's going to say Nick Sirianni won more games. Another Nick Sirianni went to the playoffs for the 4 straight years. So, I mean, he has to look at it in that regard. And I don't want to pretend to know Nick Sirianni that well. I've covered 10 games, whatever, how many games it was I covered last year, and I hadn't covered him before that. But it just seems to me, in the little time I've gotten to know him, that he could handle that and say, "Yeah, I'm the CEO of this organization." And there have been times when Andy Reid has let others call plays for him, and been the CEO, but he's the guy in his head. Now he's obviously a more of a presence at all times than Nick is at this point. But that wasn't always the case, and Andy was able to say, "Hey, you know what? I don't care who's getting the credit for doing what, as long as we're winning." And that's the place Nick has to get to.
Yeah. It is. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. I want to talk about you mentioning Vic and some of the personnel things. Cornerback has all of a sudden become a really crowded room, Brookie. And one guy you're very familiar with from both ends, James Bradbury, with the Giants and with the Eagles. He's probably not going to be here week 1. But I also think, and you wrote about this, there's no necessity, sense of urgency to cut him right away. He's already on the roster. You can cut him post June 1st. My strategy would be to carry him through training camp, or as far as, maybe there's an injury somewhere else and you get the Sam Bradford effect and somebody gets a little bit desperate. They need a starting corner and they give you something for James Bradbury. It's not going to be a first round pick, but you get something somewhat valuable for James Bradbury. But that doesn't take into account the human nature aspect of it. And you can't just string people along. You can if you want to be a dick, but James probably sees the writing on the wall. If you're the GM, I'm giving you Howie Roseman's hat, Brookie. How do you handle this James Bradbury situation?
Yeah, I'm sure he has by now taken James's temperature and, okay, what's your feeling on everything? And, I don't want to sell him a bill of goods because, to me, if you start doing that, James Bradbury has friends in the NFL, and he starts saying, yeah, they told me this, and, and he also has an agent, and yeah, the Eagles did this to my guy. I'm not going to, you don't want to play that game. So you take his temperature and maybe you keep him in training camp. If I'm the Eagles, maybe I do want to see what he looks like in training camp, because you never know who gets hurt in training camp. I was looking through guys who've been drafted in the first round, cornerbacks in the last 10 years or so, the other day, and a lot of them didn't make it through the season.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the position. It's such a quick twist. Knee punishment on the knees by what you have to do at that position. So, to your point, keep them as long as you can. And as I wrote in my story, whatever James Bradbury rubs off on Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean or any other young player, it's going to be a good thing. I would want Slay's confidence rubbing off on all my younger players, but I'm not sure I want all of, I know Howie came out and told Quinyon Mitchell he wants him to sleep next to, live next to, sleep next to, do everything with Slay. And Slay's been a great player. But I'm not sure Slay's always the guy that you want to voice in the players of your young players' heads, because he's also got a very fierce independent streak, when it comes to.
He does.
So,
but you know what? He's a great teammate, though. He tries to pick everybody up. Now
he does.
He will speak up if he doesn't like the way he's being used.
That's the part of it I'm more alluding to. But to your point about Bradbury, I just think, you keep him around, and if somebody at some point, even a 7th round pick, and maybe try to make things right for Bradbury, say, hey, we're sending you here. You're going to get a chance to play here, turn things around. But yeah, I think your idea is probably the best one that there is.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting element too with the culture that goes into it. alluding again to Kenny Gainwell's comments, kind of the disconnect almost he mentioned between the upstairs and the guys in the locker room. I don't think you want to fracture that going into the season. So you got to handle the James Bradbury situation the right way. I mean, if all the veterans love James Bradbury, despite what the fans think, and then you do him wrong, you might further that disconnect going into the season, which wouldn't be a good thing.
Yeah, right. And I think there's a pretty good kumbaya going on with this team right now after what happened last season. I think Saquon Barkley coming in has rejuvenated a lot of these offensive guys. Jalen Hurts seems to have taken a liking to Saquon right away.
He's got a squad partner.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But he seems to, really be on board with that. AJ Brown's already gone to a Sixers game with Saquon. Saquon, to me, is one of those personalities that guys just gravitate toward him. Now he has to stay healthy and play well for that to work. But, I think he's a guy who, despite being his first year in that locker room, is going to be an immediate leader. So you have that factor. Defensively, I think they need to find themselves more and who's going to be the leader of that defense. Brandon Graham, yeah, that's great. But to me, you need a guy who's on the field more to be that guy who's going to really pick things up. And I'm not sure who that guy is.
Who is that guy?
Yeah, there's no obvious answer to this after Fletcher's
you typically go to linebacker, but I mean, that's just not relevant here because of what the Eagles have done with that position.
Devin White is a guy who's been around, but
is it Darius Slay at this point?
Yeah, but he's not really
he's not the vocal guy, but they've kind of pointed to him.
Very
they gave him
vocal,
the cap.
but
No, I mean, yeah, I didn't mean it like that. But yeah,
maybe CJ Gardner-Johnson can pull it off because he's been in that locker room. He knows people, but there's so much turnover. There's so many guys who weren't there when he was last there. So,
yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about leadership. Fletch is going to be missed. Boy, yeah, I don't. There's not a natural, other than, and you can't. This is one thing that the 5th round picks, Brookie. I mean, maybe Jeremiah Trotter Jr. develops into that type of leader, but it's crazy to me. This week I've been talking to people. Anaya Smith is this, and he's a great route runner, and he's going to be a star, and Trott's going to step in, and he's going to be a star, and Trevor Keegan's going to be the starting right guard. These are 5th round picks. We've been around for a while. That doesn't happen. Maybe if you're lucky. This is one of them.
This is one of my favorite recent researches too. From 2017 to 2020, the Eagles drafted 28 players. How many do you think are left, and how many 1st round picks do you think are left from 2017 through 2020 drafts?
Oh, yeah. I mean, life moves quickly in the NFL, so my immediate answer is not many.
5. The answer is 5, and 4 of them came from the 2018 draft, which was the only one that didn't have a 1st round.
Yeah,
pick.
that was the phenomenal draft. Yeah,
was the Dallas Goedert draft.
Dallas Goedert, Jordan Mailata.
Yeah. Even Matt Pryor, the guy who's not here, is still in the NFL.
Josh Sweat was the other one who's still around.
Yeah, Avonte Maddox was Josh Sweat, Avonte Maddox, Goddard, Mailata, Matt Pryor, who is still in the NFL. So yeah, that was a really good draft. The next year was the Dillard draft, and you got Miles Sanders, and then 20. Then the Jalen Hurts draft was an abject disaster everywhere but Jalen Hurts. But you got your quarterback,
right?
So that helps.
Yeah. Now, I think they've done better in 21 and 22.
Yeah, 21 looks real good with Devontae, Landon, Milton Williams, even.
Yeah.
And then 2022 with Jordan Davis, Cam Jurgens, Nakobe Dean. Jury's still out.
Out on that one for sure.
And Jalen Carter, to me, is going to be a star as long as he keeps his off the field issues in check. Nolan Smith, Tyler Steen, Sidney Brown. I love Kaylee Ringo's upside, but that's just upside.
I like Sidney Brown's upside too.
I like Sidney.
Yeah, I like Sidney as well.
See how he comes back from the ACL this year.
And then this year. Yeah, but 5th round picks, I mean,
No, yeah.
Just cross your finger and you get one who contributes. And
right. Yeah. Jason Kelsey, who was a 6th-round pick, doesn't come along every day.
Yeah.
So Jordan Mailata doesn't come along every day. 7th-round pick,
Yeah.
So
hope is not a strategy. Hoping for 5th-round picks, that's not the way.
Not
to
a good
go.
strategy. But Bob, you just brought up Jason Kelsey. I want to kind of ask you the same thing you just talked about on the inverse. Who's the leader of the defense? Well, Jason Kelsey's gone on offense. I think he was the leader on that offensive side. I think it's more obvious who should step up into the leader role on offense, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown. But how do you think that plays out? Jalen Hurts is not that same type of leader as people are used to. Who do you think steps up into that role? Is it more A.J. Brown?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's so much AJ because I don't see him being – I see him being as a guy making guys accountable in terms of doing their work, doing the right things in the locker room. But I'm going to go back to Saquon. I think he can be that guy right away. And I think Jalen is smart enough to understand, hey, he's got to be a little more out there. And he seems like he has been a little more out there. I don't even know what made me go back to look at this, but it impressed me about Jalen when we were this is what it was. Some of the rookies talking about, Jalen was, and we're talking about 3rd and 4th round picks here, 4th and 5th round picks. Jalen called me right away. He was the first guy to call me. That impressed. And then I was looking at a story I did on Tyree Phillips after he went back to the Giants after spending some time on the Eagles practice squad. And I was reading Tyree Phillips and saying, Jalen called me to congratulate me after I went back to the Giants. And that impressed me that, Tyree Phillips was a practice squad guy who Jalen Hurts didn't, he's a quarterback and he called. So I think that's in there. I'm fascinated to see what Jalen is like outwardly. I don't think he's ever going to give us, the media, what we want in terms of a relationship with him. But I can see him being more of a leader. And the other guy to me, to your point, Zander, is I think there's leaders on that offensive side of the ball. The other guy to me who can pick up the slack for Kelsey on the offensive line is Jordan Mailata. I think Jordan has that type of personality to demand and in the right sort of way. So I think there are guys on that side of the ball too.
George just got to clean up the language in front of the camera.
He doesn't. He can come on your show.
I love it. I'm joking. I love Jordan.
He can come on your
drop
show.
as many F-bombs as you want, Jordan. I love it. At Brooke OB, Shane Steichen, famous dropper of F-bombs as well. I love Shane as well. Follow Bob.
I'll tell you my favorite F-bomb story. Somebody who recently died, Whitey Herzog, when he was the manager of the Cardinals, hated the electronic media, hated the TVs and the radios, but he loved the print media. So whenever they were all in the room together, he would just drop F-bombs.
So they couldn't use it. Yeah. I love that. At Brooke OB, make sure you follow Brookie over at NJ.com on Twitter. Does a tremendous job covering this team. You got to change your link on your Twitter page, NJ.com/Eagles, Brookie. You still got the Giants up there.
Oh, all right. I didn't even know I did that. Well,
I just checked. All right. So we'll get that done. Make sure you read him. He's doing tremendous work with our buddy Chris Franklin as well over to NJ.com. All right. Since you want to talk to Vic, I'm going to make it more difficult. First question you're giving to Kellen Moore. If you're leading off, first question.
Not a great one, but Kellen, is there going to be more motion in this offense than there was?
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Bottom 5, man. They never use motion.
Right. So I
like it.
That's one to come up for sure. Not that this is as much his call, but who's your right guard going to be? Obviously, there's plenty to ask.
That's Stout's call. Maybe we'll get Stout.
That would be great if we could get him in there on a consistent basis. But really, he is like a 4th coordinator. So.
Yeah, well, he is the run game coordinator.
Right. But we don't get to get him on podium all the time.
That's all that matters. Yeah, you're right.
Bob, thanks for joining the show, man. We appreciate it. We'll be looking forward to hearing what you have to ask to the coordinators later on today.
All right. Safe travels. I'll see you down there.
All right. I'll see you, John.
Bob. There's Bob Brookover from NJ.com writing about the Eagles. And I always love hearing what he has to say about Saquon, just because he covered Saquon all through his tenure in New York. So Bob has some good insights on Saquon.
I love his Woody Herzog story. Yeah, guys do that. They use that.
You know what story I think of every time we talk F-bomb? You can probably guess.
My Adrian Peterson story.
Yeah, your Adrian Peterson and Chester Taylor story.
Yeah. The F-bombs, AJ's like that. AJ's like, he doesn't drop F-bombs, but all the cameras show up and he gives the bland answers, and then they go away and I'll answer anything you want and I'll be truthful, but he does not want to do it with the cameras around.
Is Jalen at all like that? No.
Jalen,
like when I'm talking about off the record, is Jalen a guy that you guys talk to, or is he pretty mute with you guys overall?
We generally get one opportunity a year to talk to. Jalen only gets the podium treatment. Very rarely at the end of the season, clean out day, he might do something at his locker, but he doesn't generally. And most quarterbacks don't, because there's too many people. So it's not that part of it. It's just the enormity of the job requires the podium treatment, and everybody's on guard at the podium. So it is what it is.
We'll go to our final commercial timeout of this Thursday edition of Birds 365. We'll put a wrap on Birds 365 coming up next, and we'll get John's final thoughts as he prepares to talk to the coordinators later today at 1 p.m. Eastern. So Shane Steichen, Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio set to speak later today, so we'll hear from them. Stay tuned on Birds 365. Don't forget to like the show. Looks like we're almost at the 100 mark, so we appreciate everybody tuning in. Stay locked in on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Wrapping up this Thursday edition of Birds 365. Johnny Mac, I'll ask you the same question you asked Bob, and I want it for each coordinator. If you're lead off today, what are you asking Kellen, and what are you asking Vic?
With Kellen, is probably about the relationship between him and Nick and how that is developing. That would be, because I think that's the biggest story of the entire season for the Philadelphia Eagles. And with Vic, there's so much with Vic. You can talk about the tampering. You can talk about last year with the Eagles wanting to hire him. I imagine that's going to come up, but I don't want to lead off with that.
Yeah,
I would lead off with, is he comfortable with the players he has at the all-ball linebacker position? Which he's going to say yes, but
I'll answer for him. No, I'm not.
well, yeah, if he had truth serum.
Yeah, if he had truth serum.
But yeah, I don't see how he could be comfortable. And then more philosophically, I'll probably get into there's going to be a lot of people there, so it might be difficult. But so many people have copied his defense, what I talk about it on the show. I want to ask him how much it's evolved. He mentioned last year in Miami that he wished that people would stop doing it. How much has he evolved it because of how many copycats there are? I want to ask him that question.
And how about a bonus for Michael Clay if you guys speak with him? He actually has some new looks this year.
All the returners.
Yeah, they got a lot of players for special teams, and there's new rules in the NFL.
The kickoff rules obviously are a big thing. I don't think Michael's going to be involved today, but we'll see. They might throw him in there if there's a lull in between Kellen and Vic. I'm trying to think. Last year, he did not speak when the Eagles introduced Sean Desai and Brian Johnson as the coordinators. It was very similar timing, by the way. I think it was May 11th. They're actually earlier this year, if anything, shockingly.
All right, let's see how it all shakes out. Everybody's been waiting to hear from the coordinator, so we'll hear from them. I want to thank everybody in the chat box. Johnny Mac, we are not exclusive to Eagles fans. Did you know this? We have Ian15, a Chiefs fan who's in here stirring up some Eagles fans. We have James Jones. He's a Washington Commanders fan in here. James Carver is a big Eagle fan. So a lot of Eagles fans, but plenty of other fans of the NFL in the chat box. We appreciate you all for being here, for tuning in, for sharing your chats with us. Believe me, I read them, and I do appreciate most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. I do appreciate all you guys for staying loyal to the channel and helping us grow. So drop a like on your way out. Johnny Mac, get down to NovaCare safely. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Birds 365.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See you tomorrow, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.